Quadrilaterals. A quadrilateral is easy to remember if you break down the shape. Break down the word, sorry. So quad means four, like a quad bike, or if you had quadlets, that would be 4 children from one pregnancy. And lateral in Latin means side. So a quadrilateral is a 4-sided shape. Now, people often get confused with the word polygon. Now, a polygon means many. So poly means many, and gon comes from a gonis, which means elbow in Greek. Now, the reason a gon is chosen is because when you draw your hand, I'm really bad at drawing, by the way, missing a thumb. Your bones and your elbow, you have 2 straight bones and they join to make an angle. So if you have many of these, you end up with a 2D shape that's made out of many straight sides, and that's why it's called a polygon. Now, a quadrilateral is a type of polygon because it's a shape made out of 4 straight sides that contains 4 angles. So if you get asked what a 4-sided shape is in your exam, it's a quadrilateral. And I'm now going to go through all the different types of these. Before we start, I want to show you 2 really important parts of notation. Notation means to note something or to show something in a short form. So, for example, if you have 2 parallel lines, and I'll just write it down because lots of people spell it wrong. Just remember 2 parallel lines, double L. That means they have exactly the same angle. How we show that is we draw the same number of angles on it. So for instance, these 2 lines are both parallel because they have 2 arrows on them. Whereas these 2 lines would be another group of parallel lines that were at a different angle because they have 2 arrows on them instead of just 1. The other thing you need to know is if 2 lines are exactly the same length. If they're exactly the same length, you just put a dash. And why we use a dash is because you would measure a dash with a ruler, so it's to do with length, whereas you would measure an angle with, you measure an arrow with a protractor because it's an angle. So the arrow signifies an angle because there's a little angle in there and there, whereas a straight line is just a length. So when 2 things are the same length, you would put a dash. If they're the same angle, which means they're parallel, you'd put an arrow. Sometimes, in some shapes, for instance, if I drew you a rhombus, which is basically a square pushed to one side so it looks like a diamond, but you must use rhombus. Okay, I'll spell that for you. RH, it's got a silent H. Rhombus, okay. You must use the word rhombus, never diamond. Okay, these 2 sides are parallel. And these 2 sides are parallel to each other. So I have 2 pairs of parallel sides. 1 pair here, 2 pairs there. But also, because it's a square pushed over, I know that every single line is the same length. So I can use my dash notation to show that it's identical. And this would allow me to tell the difference between this rhombus and a parallelogram. Because in a parallelogram, these 2 are the same angle, these 2 are the same angle, but I'd need to put another colour. I'd need to put a dash here and a dash here, but a double dash here and a double dash here, because parallel sides are the same length, but not all sides are the same length. So I know that this is a pushed over rectangle rather than a pushed over square. And a pushed over rectangle is called a parallelogram, so you just put parallel and then ogram on the end, but a pushed over square is a rhombus. Okay, I'm going to come back to this shortly. Why these dashes and arrows are so important is because if you're really pants at drawing, like I am, you can use the dashes and arrows to actually explain to a mathematician what your shape should look like, even if you can't draw it very accurately. So, for example, this isn't a perfect square, but if I do this, oops, I'm telling a mathematician that this side, and this side, and this side are all the same length. And if I draw a 90-degree right angle box in here, that tells the examiner that I understand that because these are all the same length, that my angles must also be identical too. So this would be how I would draw a square. And it's a quadrilateral because it has 4 sides. If I was to take this square and push this corner, I would end up with a rhombus because that's not too bad actually. I've pushed my square over slightly. Now all of my lines are the same length, but this side is only parallel with this side, and this side is only parallel with this side, and because it's a square pushed over, we call that a rhombus, as I've mentioned before. So a square stood up at 90 degrees is just called a square. Sorry, but if you push it over slightly, it then becomes a rhombus. Another quadrilateral that you see often is a rectangle. Now I would have to put in a rectangle opposite sides are parallel, opposite sides are the same length and they're parallel. So for instance, I know that these 2 lines are both parallel and the same length, but these 2 lines are both parallel and the same length. So we have 2 groups there essentially, okay? And that makes it a rectangle. Now when you have a shape that all of the angles are the same size and all of the sides are the same size, then that's called a regular shape. Whereas a rectangle is irregular because the sides and the angles are not the same. A rhombus is an irregular shape because although the sides are the same length, the angles aren't. Can you see that here, this angle is very small, but this angle is much, much bigger? Because when we push our shape to the side, for it to be able to bend, this angle and this angle here have to get much smaller to accommodate that movement. And this angle and this angle become larger to make up for it. So in a rhombus, opposite angles are identical. If I push my rectangle over, I end up with a parallelogram. So again, opposite sides are the same length. So I've got two different types of lengths here. I've got this length and this length, which is shorter. And then opposite sides are also parallel. So I need to show that I've got two types. So I need one arrow on one pair and two arrows on the other pair. And this is called a parallelogram. Just remember, parallel, you can't have something that's parallel without two identical lines, and that's why parallel has the double L in the side, in the centre of it, because they're two identical angled lines. Okay, another one. So back in the day when they used to have lions and tigers and things at zoos, quite often you'd see them standing on a trapeze, and that's where it gets its name from. This is called a trapezium. Okay, if it ends in ium, it's singular, but if you have many, it's trapezia, and that's plural. Oops, forgot the L. Okay, now in a trapezium, it's a four-sided shape. Again, these are all quadrilaterals, but the special thing about it is only one pair of sides are the same angle. The rest are all different angles. So these two are parallel and the rest aren't. And none of the sides have to be the same length. Now this is a regular, is an irregular trapezium, okay? And the other trapezium you can see, although it's not regular, is called an isosceles trapezium. And iso means two identical things. So in an isosceles trapezium, the two outside edges, the two outside sides are identical, meaning that you have a line of symmetry down the middle, like you would an isosceles triangle. And that's why it's called an isosceles trapezium, because two of the sides are the same length. But again, because it's a trapezium, you only have two sides that are the same angle. So this is called an isosceles trapezium. Okay, there's a couple more to do, so I'm just going to move over here. So far we've covered a square, which is a regular shape because all of its sides and angles are matched. So you have all of the same, you have four side lengths that are the same and four angles that are the same. And then if you push a square over slightly, you get a rhombus. Then a rectangle is an irregular shape because not all of the sides are the same length, although all the angles are 90 degrees. For a shape to be regular, all of the angles and all of the side lengths have to be the same. They have to come as a pair. Then if you push a rectangle over, you get a parallelogram. Then if your quadrilateral only has two parallel sides, that will give you a trapezium. And if this side is an identical length to the other side, then that would become an isosceles trapezium, to tell you that the iso tells you that you have two identical length sides, like you would if you had an isosceles triangle. So that means you have one line of symmetry, and you wouldn't get a line of symmetry on this shape because there's nothing for it to reflect. It doesn't reflect. These sides are not similar in any way. So another four-sided shape is a delta. This length and this length always have to be identical. And that's it really. You sometimes see it called an arrowhead because it looks like an arrow. I'm really bad at drawing, sorry guys. But the actual proper term is called a delta. The other one you'll see is a kite. Now with a kite, although no angles are parallel, the same as a delta, these two lengths have to be identical and these two lengths have to be identical. And that's just known as a kite. and I'm pretty sure that that's all of them. So you need to know these off by heart, and in the next video I'm going to show you how to calculate the areas of all of them.